What we are witnessing right now is something of biblical proportions, because the last time we saw a positive review score for a Crusader Kings expansion was literally over 5 years ago, when Holy Fury dropped for CK2. If that doesn't tell you the dire state that CK3 release schedules have been in, then I don't know what else to say. Tours and Tournaments has been one of the most radical, and I mean radical, comeback cycles that I have seen in Paradox history, and in this video I will of course be covering the standard features and whether or not it is worth a whopping $30. Praise Gaben, that is an incredibly high amount to pay for a DLC, but Paradox keeps pushing it, so I must review nevertheless. I'll also be talking about whether the hype is truly justified and where CK3 could go in the future with its roadmap teasing additional content. To first get a sense of why this expansion has been so positively received, you need to look back at the very first dev diary that was teased all the way back in March. Ironically, the community reacted incredibly negatively to the news on most social media platforms, including Paradox Plaza, their home forum. A big issue that has been plaguing the reception of Paradox's recent push towards more story-driven DLC has been criticism in relation to mechanics. However, I think the team still did a good job at clarifying in later dev diaries their intentions with the expansion, while going into detail about the different mechanics instead of leaving the community to piece together the details, a la Royal Court. For comparison, Royal Court had virtually no dislikes or disagreements to be seen. In fact, with its introductory post, it had an incredible amount of support because of its unabashed policy of reworking cultures and making them more interactive. And yet, the expansion took nearly a year to release and is sitting with a mixed review score on Steam. But why is this? The reason I mentioned length is that expectations play a big hand into how high of a bar new content has to pass, and one of the reasons why Tours and Tournaments got so shit-faced on its first post. If it's 11 months and 30 dev diaries later and you still have a shoddy product with bugs galore, people are going to be understandably and justifiably pissed. Conversely, Tours and Tournaments had roughly 3 months of coverage before release and has exceeded expectations for many people. Despite this, it's more RP focused, has a $30 price tag, and numerous sophisticated mechanics that involve planning out your character's yearly activities. So what's going on here? I think what a lot of people forget is that when it comes to CK3, there is a significant lack of downtime. What I mean when I say downtime, quote unquote, is the 80% of the game outside of warfare and scheming to abduct your opponent's children, where you are most likely waiting idly by for something to happen. Tours and Tournaments addresses this by taking a different approach than Royal Courts. Instead of Royal Courts' broad answers to many different areas of the game in the form of courts and culture fusions, Tours and Tournaments opted for another approach. Instead of one singular solution, they instead took the time to develop many different, albeit similar, events to keep characters occupied. While a few of them are downright zany and borderline psychotic in a similar vein to CK2 activities, but I mean, I do like those, a lot of them are genuinely good ideas that allow the player to get to know their court and fellow commoners, including their vassals, much better. One of my favorite examples of this is how activities are structured. Great feasts, hunts, and weddings are all different from the types of guests that you will be inviting to the way that their dialogue boxes themselves are scripted, but the main theming that connects all of this together is being able to tour your realm. Jocosely, because I am running out of ways to say ironically, for a game that is all about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer, CK3 didn't have too many outlets to consort with the side characters like vassals. The previous expansion added courts, but once the honeymoon phase wears off, vassals become increasingly obvious placeholders for text-based events, which have little bearing and are not reflective of their personality. They are, in the end, caricatures. It may seem like I am knocking on Royal Court a lot here, and there were a few things that I liked about it, namely the creative ways you could fuse cultures, but when you are asking players for $30 in expansion, you better step up to the plate and offer something revolutionary. I theorized that one of the factors behind the incredibly long dev time was because the devs thought they could do this by reinventing the wheel with a big culture system. Tours seems to be a far different strategy, though, when you look at what it includes. Contest and the intent system, a way to rile up your rivals before gutting them like the vermin they are, remind me more of Holy Fury's dueling system than anything else, and that's a good thing. There is no shame in reusing and updating mechanics as long as they have worked in the past and received community approval. Wasting needless amounts of time over something that hasn't seen a lick of community feedback or testing is completely asinine. However, there are some new mechanics in particular that I really enjoy seeing the devs put forward. The first one isn't big per se, but having traits that level up with your character's experience level is something that I love to see because it rewards different playstyles depending on how you aim to develop your character accordingly. One other feature that I didn't think I would have enjoyed nearly as much as I do now is the 3D model viewer. The last 3D viewer we had was the throne room, and even though it does have its perks, the repetition of seeing the same screen and forcing yourself to be dragged through the vassal's requests has conditioned me to cringe every time I have to click on an interface. Now, seeing the little towns and tournaments propped up is oddly comforting, and it warms my cold heart to see the fictional peasants care for my tyrannical ruler. I do want to air a brief complaint about titles, though, because I think that we are getting to the point of having a lot of bloat, and for players that want to be involved in RP, having to individually look through each character and assign them to 30 plus different titles can be exhausting at times. Also, there is a serious lack of regional flavored events in my opinion, and some regions, specifically the eastern side of the map, noticeably suffer from this. In the future, I wouldn't mind if there was some kind of custodians team similar to Stellaris that went back and added culturally relevant activities and events to tie in with the expansion. Who knows, we could see this with the Legacy of Persia culture pack, but I'm not too sure that they will completely go back and add all new Persian themed events. Something that does please me is the smart way that Tours goes about interconnectivity. While the last expansion did branch out and include vassals and a different number of events, it mainly added more systems to the already cluttered UI of CK3, which didn't help with the amount of micromanaging that you have to do during key moments. Making the choice to add on to something to players already having an experience with was not only smarter and efficient, but it offers a lower learning curve, and I think that this is key when getting players to try out newer systems. Fidgeting with things like cultural traditions and court mechanics, while fun for some, ultimately can leave a lot of players frustrated when they simply do not wish to engage at times. That's the beauty of Tours and Tournaments. You can completely ignore its mechanics, pick it up later on, and still not miss a thing. These adventures are typically contained to your characters, and it makes the CK3 experience that much more intimate. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the balance between mechanics and RP, because early on I saw many people making the assumption that you could only have one or the other for DLC, when this clearly isn't the case here. It's true that RP flavor can fall outside of actual gameplay mechanics and stay confined to text-based events, but oftentimes roleplay is built on pre-existing mechanics, which require the player's input and imagination to then create a story. Content like Fate of Iberia did this quite well in my opinion, where they used the struggle as a mechanic to drive roleplay and still reward less immersed players, depending on how they pursued a certain playstyle. In contrast to this, Royal Court instead had a big barrier to entry, where you need to either be a king or have a significant presence in a region to interact with most of its mechanics, and that is a big mistake. Tours does not separate the two into distinct categories, where you can instead have meaningful rewards and experiences and go at your own pace regardless of your level. So at the end of the day, is Tours and Tournaments worth it? Well, I have had my fair share of fun with the expansion, and I do truly believe that it adds another dimension of gameplay to the way that you interact with vassals and develop your character. $30 is a lot to ask for from someone in this economy. Definitely not in this economy. That said, the praise that it has received is well deserved because the developers chose a few different areas to improve on and went big, without scattering bite-sized features throughout an expansion-sized DLC. If you are someone that can't bear waiting for things to happen in CK3 or want another chance to dive deep into the medieval European sandbox, go ahead. Otherwise, I would wait for a fair discount, as $30 is definitely not light pocket change. Looking into the future, Paradox has taken a great step in having the community vote for the next DLC. Wards and Wardens won't change the genre by any means with its $5 price tag, but seeing the release date as far back as July 21st makes me cautiously optimistic, especially after how well they managed to pull Tours and Tournaments off. Of course, that is still subjective though, you may disagree. There is not much that we know about Legacy of Persia as far as specific details go, but I have a video covering both Wards and the Persia DLC if my dry commentary has tickled your fancy. Otherwise, that has been For Extraordinaire. I love you guys and hope to see you guys later. Alright, peace.